The terrible announcement has come from the Hamas terrorist organization. The Bibas, Israeli hostage family members, will return in the fallen phase. The family said that they have not received an official update, adding that they are aware of Hamas's statement that only the remains of Shiri, Ariel, and Kfir will be returned to Israel on Thursday in the phase of the captive who fell in captivity by Hamas. On the other hand, another announcement has come that all 6 of the remaining live captives from the first phase will be released this coming Saturday, and all the rest of the remaining hostages will be released at once in the second phase of the agreement. This is a dramatic proposal that Hamas has made to Israel, and Israeli analysts believe that this is just another ploy to try and preserve the existence of the Hamas terrorist organization in control of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, Israel and Hamas have both confirmed that all the remaining live hostages from Phase A of the agreement will be released this coming Saturday, while the Prime Minister's office officially confirmed that Hamas will release the remains of 4 hostages who died in captivity on Thursday. The living hostages to be released include Isham el-Sayed and Aveya Manguisto. Next week, Hamas will release the remains of the other 4 fallen hostages, bringing that part of Phase A to a conclusion. And after that, there will be still 59 hostages in captivity in Gaza, at least 28 of them believed to be deceased. In other news, a tunnel that the IDF demolished after female hostages emerged from it has been rebuilt by Hamas, but now the IDF is destroying it once and for all. The negotiations over the future of the Gaza Strip is also continuing as Arab governments are trying to talk US President Donald Trump out of his plan to evacuate the residents of Gaza by offering to invest billions of dollars into the US economy. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us behind the scenes of the forces operating in our Middle East and explain why Saudi Arabia wants to mediate a nuclear agreement between Iran and Trump and whether it will prevent a massive attack on Iran. And amidst all of this, Operation Iron Wall is continuing with 25 wanted men arrested over the last 24 hours, including 2 in the city of Jenin. And finally, we turn our attention to the southern border and ask the question, is Egypt seriously threatening to attack Israel? Why is everybody suddenly talking about a war with Egypt, and is the IDF getting ready? Ever since the announcement of Trump's plan for Gaza, this talk has been increasing, including media reports in Egypt about plans being dusted off to strike the Israeli nuclear reactor at Dimona and other war maneuvers. And meanwhile, after 2.5 months of ceasefire agreement, the IDF has completed its withdrawal from southern Lebanon, except for 5 positions agreed upon with the Americans. Hezbollah's arms race has been shut down by Israel, but there is still much work to be done. There's a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 502 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, as well as the terror organizations in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, TBN Israel, so that you can stay tuned to the truth and know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This is what it's all about. I also want to remind you of our crucial campaign to rebuild Israel. Since October 7th, rockets have devastated the land of Israel, destroying over 57,000 acres of forests. Your support will help restore hope and revive the land. So join us in this effort by donating today at www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael, and together we can make an impact in this land. Hamas has conveyed to Israel a new proposal for the second phase of the hostage deal. So according to reports, the new proposal is that the framework of releasing hostages in phases will be scrapped, and instead Hamas proposes to release all the remaining hostages at once. Behind the proposal lies a strategic motive, as in the second phase of the deal, the release of prisoners is no longer at the top of Hamas's priorities. Instead, the organization seeks to guarantee its survival in the Gaza Strip, either formally or informally. The meaning of the proposal is that Hamas is trying to leverage holding the hostages in order to secure its continued existence in the Gaza Strip, while offering Israel everything for everything. The release of all the hostages in return for guaranteeing its political future in Gaza. And meanwhile, in the immediate future, the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement on Tuesday evening saying that in the negotiations in Cairo, understandings were reached under which on Saturday, 6 living hostages from Phase A will be released. On Thursday, 4 deceased hostages will be handed over to Israel in accordance with the agreement. 4 additional deceased hostages are expected to be handed over to Israel next week. A political source added, if the Cairo agreement is realized, this is an important achievement for Israel. And elsewhere, senior Hamas official Khalil El-Haya said in an official statement, we decided on Thursday to hand over 4 bodies of hostages in preparation for the second stage of the negotiations on the agreement. The handing over of the remaining bodies will be completed according to what was agreed upon in the 6th week of implementing the agreement. 6 prisoners of the occupation, which is how Hamas refers to the hostages that it kidnapped, who are alive, will be released on Saturday, including Isham El-Sayed and Aveya Manguisto, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. So, media outlets around the world reported on Tuesday's dramatic announcement by Hamas regarding the release of 6 living hostages this coming Saturday and 4 deceased hostages tomorrow. Most of the coverage focused on the part about Shiri and her small children, Ariel and Kfir, being amongst the hostages whose remains will be returned on Thursday because they died in captivity by the Hamas terrorist organization. The footage of their abduction has been seen around the world, shocking many people and becoming a symbol of the cruelty of Hamas. In the various reports, the Israeli clarifications that their fate has not yet been verified were emphasized, as well as the Bibas family's own statement that they have not yet received an official notice of their death. However, after 501 days of hope for a miracle, we are now left with a grave fear that the worst might indeed have happened. The Bibas family announced that they are aware of Hamas's statement that Shiri Bibas and the small children, Ariel and Kfir, will return the day after tomorrow, Thursday, in the deceased hostage phase. They issued a brave statement on the matter, saying that until we receive certainty, our journey is not over. I'll pause for a moment and say that we should unite in prayer for the well-being of this unfortunate family that Hamas has shattered in every possible way. Our hearts and the hearts of all Israel are with Yarden Bibas, the father, who also recently returned home from Hamas captivity. Hamas claimed back in the end of November 2023 that Shiri and her 2 children were killed in an Israeli airstrike, but they never offered any proof of this. On the Israeli side, they have also not indicated at any stage that there is any evidence for that. There was also a claim at some point that they were being held by a different organization other than Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hamas even published a video of the father Yarden in captivity after he was allegedly informed of their deaths. The IDF spokesperson's unit at the time responded to the difficult video and to the terrorist organization's claims, saying that Hamas continues to act in a cruel and inhumane way, and the IDF is examining the reliability of the information. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised the family that the matter is under review and that they would be updated on any updated information. In any case, there is only one place to lay the blame for the deaths of Shiri Bibas and her children, and that is at the feet of the Hamas terrorist organization, which is a terrorist organization whose foundations are built on blind hatred and brutal violence against Israel. This led Hamas to murder hostages and starve them to death. Hamas let other hostages die from diseases and infections, locking them up in airless underground dungeons and denying them medical care while refusing to allow the Red Cross to visit them. In a rational and fair world, Hamas would be made to pay for its diabolical crimes. But in the international community, which always likes to talk about justice and the rules-based international order and humanitarian laws and all that stuff, it is very unlikely to enforce the rules in this case. So that leaves Israel to sort this out, and I believe that this will happen, but perhaps not right now. What's left of the Hamas leadership seems to understand this is likely to happen as well. They are requesting that the mediating countries secure guarantees from Israel that after they have been exiled to third countries, Israel and the Mossad in Israel will not hunt them down and assassinate them as has happened in the past. I do not think that this is a reasonable request, and it must be made clear to everyone, including Hamas and also the Israeli public, that there is a price to pay for carrying out attacks against Israel, and there is no exception and no expiration date on this price. This is not just about vengeance for what has already been done. It is about deterrence against future attacks, and if these terrorists see that Israel was attacked and the people who died didn't do anything with it, then this will encourage others to try and attack Israel, and that can't be allowed to happen again. So here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development in this matter, and as always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and subscribing to the YouTube channel TBN Israel if you haven't already, to never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. We now turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani to take us into the thick of what happened in recent days in our neighborhood, the Middle East. On the one hand, United States President Donald Trump insists on his plan to evacuate the residents of the Gaza Strip, but his people are not ruling out alternative proposals, and Arab leaders are hastily formulating their own plans to rehabilitate the Strip, with a summit planned in Riyadh at the end of the week. We'll turn it over to you, Mati, to take us into the depths of all of this.
Thank you, Yael. What we're here to talk about today is to analyze how Saudi, Israel, and the United States are reshaping their relationship. But before we do that, let's zoom out to everything that's been changing in this part of the world up to this very moment. Let's just go back a year and a half. Look at the interests of the Iranians in this region. You have the Hamas that's mostly been eliminated, Hezbollah mostly eliminated, the Syrians are no longer on the table, the Houthis in Yemen are also mostly reduced and out of the question, and the Iranians' perception of power in this region has been greatly diminished by Israel and its allies. Then go back a couple more years. The previous Trump administration bartered an incredible deal called the Abraham Accords, where multiple Arab countries and Muslim countries in this region are now allies of Israel, trade partners of Israel and the West, and have sort of publicly sided with American and Israeli agendas in this region. And that's where it gets really interesting. On the sidelines throughout that period are the Saudis. The Saudis are the superpower, both financially, militarily, and as far as their sphere of influence goes, when you look into the Sunni Muslim world, not the Shia like the Iranians. And they've been watching carefully to see how the cards will fall, how things will sort of settle after this last war, and how Israel, together with the US, will reshape the power balance in this region. And they've done exactly that. They've waited cautiously, and now is their time to take action. They've seen Iran lose its power grip in this region. They've seen the US under the new Trump administration step hardly into action to move and reshape the power balances in this region. And they're seeing other countries, Egypt, Jordan, capitulate to the demands of the Trump administration. And here's where it gets interesting. For them, as this turn of event takes place, they're looking at things differently. And they're saying, how can we, the Saudis, now be more influential in this region? How can we have a stronger grip on what happens? How can we leave a mark that is greater on this region? And that agenda plays exactly into the agenda of the United States government led by the Trump administration. The Trump administration has clearly said, we're not going to be the ones to pay for all these changes in the region. There are those who want to pay, there are those who want to shift the agenda, move the conversation in their direction, and Saudi is on the top of that list. They have the deep pockets, They have the will to be influential in this region. They want to trade and they want stability. And all of that comes from a U.S. agreement with Saudi and with Israel. So where do we see that come into action? The Saudis have been involved with the negotiation, the ceasefire agreement between Israel, Hamas, and then bartered, of course, by the Saudis, the Qataris, the Americans, and several other countries, the Egyptians, for instance. But not only that, we're seeing them being part of the conversation when it comes also to the next day agenda in this region. Next day being, how do we deal with Iran's sphere of influence? And that's a big one for the Saudi people. The Saudis fear the Iranians to a greater degree than people can imagine. Saudi is reliant as an economy on oil trade, and the Iranians have the power, the willingness, and the weaponry to destabilize and disrupt the trade of oil in this region. All it takes is a couple missiles strategically aimed at oil refinery plants within Saudi, or ships carrying Saudi oil to other countries to deeply disrupt the Saudi economy. And they're afraid of that, and they're concerned of that, and they're acting accordingly. So the Saudis don't want to just scare the Iranians, they want an agreement with the Iranians. And they're the ones who could possibly do that. Now, the Trump administration is saying we're going to put sanctions on the Iranian government stronger than ever before. Maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian economy. We're going to aid Israel and all its agenda in this region. Again, also to put pressure on Iran and its proxy forces. But Saudi wants more than that. Saudi wants Iran to join into an agreement with them that will stabilize this region. Saudi wants the Iranians to be brought into an agenda that is more long-term in its perspective versus the short-term phase of this negotiation. The Saudis know that democracies, or in democracies, governments come and go, and they want also after the Trump administration to have a more stable economy and a more stable relationship with the Iranians in this region. And here's what gets interesting also for Israel. Israel wants the Iranians to be dealt with as a long-term issue. And part of the way to do that is to strengthen the relationship with the Saudis. So yes, going through Saudi is a way to stabilize the Iranian agenda. The reason being is because we all benefit, Israel, Saudi, and all the other countries in the region, when the Iranian agenda of proxy warfare and destabilizing other countries in the region is put on a back burner. We don't think we're going to eliminate their government's agenda overnight, but we can and hopefully will weaken their resolve in destabilizing and continuing to fight. How would that look? It could look like an American-led agreement that would bring the Saudis to the table to a long-term agreement with Israel. That could also resolve the issue between Israel, the Palestinians led by the PLO or by the Palestinian Authority within Judea and Samaria, and also bring another player into the negotiation as what happens with the next day solution for Hamas militants and Hamas government in the Gaza Strip. That's where this really gets interesting. The Saudis want to invest funds to get a stakehold in this region. The Americans want the Saudis to invest funds so they're not the ones footing the bill for everything that happens in this region. The Saudis want American guarantees of American support in the case of any hostile attacks by the Iranians in the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea, which the Americans would give them if they were part of an agreement. And Israel wants all of the above. We want stability. We want the Iranians to be sort of controlled and reduced in their influence and sphere of negative effect in this region. We want an agreement with Saudi, and we want a longer-term solution for the ongoing conflict with the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, and more specifically in Hamas-led Gaza Strip. This case study of how the US, Saudis, and Israel are working on reshaping the power balance in the Middle East is an exact example of how things can look if the Trump administration has its way with its larger plan for the Middle East. People thought that what President Trump was saying was just a speculative idea or something that was coming unprepared for, but it's exactly the opposite of that. The Trump administration has exemplified that they came well prepared to the table to push forward a plan that is good for Israel and other countries in this region. And the path to doing so, the path to stability, the path to peace, the path to long-lasting financial prosperity in this region is by stabilizing economies, trade agreements, and countries. And what that requires is it requires bringing the Saudis into the game to be a valued partner in bartering peace and long-lasting trade agreements in this region. It requires also stabilizing a relationship with the Iranians where they're not only dealt with a stick but also offered carrots afterwards, of course, after they dismantle their nuclear program, to come back as a, let's call it, viable player in this region. The Saudis look at this as an opportunity to stabilize. What are they looking at? They're looking at the Iranian threat of a nuclear plan and saying to the US and other countries around the world, help us choose. Help us choose between fearing Iran and going down the militant way or entering an agreement where you guys, the US-led coalition and Israel of course, back us so we don't have to pursue our own nuclear program and at the same time don't have to fear the Iranians reaching nuclear capability. In the Middle East, you never really fully solve an issue. It always sort of stays in the background one way or another. The people are different in their name and leadership role, but it's sort of the same agenda again and again. Saudi doesn't imagine, and neither does Israel, that the Iranians are going anytime soon. But what can change is a shift in power, pushing away the Iranian agenda, their proxy warfare, and their destabilizing force for something more positive. A positive change of events where Iran is in the back room and not involved, or they are brought to the table with incentives to dismantle their nuclear program and abandon the way of proxy warfare. And the Saudis want to see the US pushing that agenda, an agenda where they get to trade with other countries, where they are backed on a military level by the US in their interest in this region, where they get to trade with Israel and others, and where there's a longer lasting solution that sort of brings down the heat on the political conversation regarding the Palestinians, and also brings financial prosperity and raises the level and the position and stature of the Saudis in this entire conversation. One of the big issues on the table is the Palestinian problem. The Saudis have been very, very clear that they will not go to a full agreement with Israel or with the US without resolving what they call the Palestinian agenda. The Saudis are positioning themselves as bold leaders in the Arab world. They want to be the voice of reason. They want to be sort of the entity that people turn their eyes to when they need someone to barter a deal, when they need someone to stabilize a region. And for that to happen, they want to do something substantial when it comes to the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria and in the Gaza Strip. How might that look? Time only will tell, but it'll probably involve some kind of longer-term agreement and shift in the relationship between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and possibly creating another entity, Palestinian Authority-led or otherwise, in the Gaza Strip that will resolve the problem of Hamas governance in that area. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you, Mati Shoshani, for the explanation and connecting the dots. Please continue spreading the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. And don't forget to press that subscribe button if you haven't already. We now shift our focus to the northern arena, where the IDF has completed its withdrawal from Lebanon after 4 months of intense operations, which included the destruction of thousands of Hezbollah terror infrastructures in the villages close to the border. Now, the armored engineering and the infantry forces that secure the operational activity have all been redeployed to the Israeli side of the border with Lebanon, leaving just a few hundred soldiers deployed in 5 new outposts that the IDF established near the border. These are dominant and strategic positions to ensure the security of the Israeli residents, and they are located inside Lebanon. The purpose of the move is to protect exposed communities such as Metula and Shlomi, and to control potential infiltration routes of Hezbollah. This is the first time in 25 years that the IDF troops will be deployed on Lebanese soil on a semi-permanent basis. No one wanted this, but this is the situation that Hezbollah has created. So despite the Lebanese opposition, the new outposts were deployed in coordination with the American-French mechanism that is responsible for enforcing the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. And meanwhile, the Lebanese army is conducting unprecedented government operations against Hezbollah, including sweeps in southern Lebanon. Still, Israel continues to monitor the situation cautiously and clarifies that it will respond to any violation by Hezbollah. And additionally, the forces deployed on Israel's side of the border, facing north, have been massively reinforced, bringing the total size to nearly 3 times what it was before the war began. This, in addition to the clearing of most of the tunnels, bunkers, weapons depots, and other infrastructure that Hezbollah has built up in preparation for an attack, is believed to be sufficient to allow the tens of thousands of residents of northern Israel to return to their homes. So, in summary, the IDF is reorganizing itself at the northern border with a new deployment intended to prevent Hezbollah from returning to its previous positions while maintaining a strong military force ready to respond. It's also important to mention that residents of the villages adjacent to the border in Lebanon have begun to return and survey the damage. Returning residents have been seen wandering the streets of the village of Adaisach, which is just a few hundred meters from Kibbutz Misgav Am in Israel, as well as in the village of Kila, adjoining Metula, and in Messi El Jabel, overlooking Kibbutz Manara in Israel. It is important to realize that these 5 outposts inside the Lebanese territory will be used by the IDF troops for the foreseeable future, and this will be essential for providing quiet and security in the area, not only for Israelis, but for these Lebanese villages as well. The Lebanese National Army is not yet ready to deploy in these areas and provide the necessary security, and until they are, the IDF has no choice but to carry out the mission of protecting Israel's border communities. The Lebanese army, which was under the authority of the government controlled by Hezbollah when there was no president, but is now making rapid progress in becoming the army of the people of Lebanon. It still has a long way to go. They have already surprised us with their willingness to take independent actions and move aggressively against Hezbollah. It's a good start, but it is too soon to declare this issue resolved, and it is too soon to hand over responsibility for the security of the border region to the Lebanese National Army. So, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on every development in that matter, and once again, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel TBN Israel if you haven't already. Now switching our focus to the region of Judea and Samaria, where Operation Iron Wall is in full swing. So dozens of suspected terrorists were arrested in the last 24 hours, including in the city of Jenin, bringing the total number of terrorists suspected taken off the streets to 380 since this operation began. Dozens of plots to carry out attack against Israelis were broken up in the course of these sweeps, with many of the eliminated terrorists going down in a violent battle with the Israeli forces sent to arrest them. In other words, they didn't want to be taken alive, so they fired at the Israeli forces and were fired upon in return, making it possible for them to get their wish. Finally, we turn our attention to the southern border and ask, why is everyone talking about a war between Israel and Egypt? In recent weeks, discussions about a possible confrontation between Israel and Egypt have intensified, largely fueled by videos and publications on social media depicting Egyptian military exercises and alleged preparations against Israel. However, the IDF and the security establishment in Israel assesses that these are exaggerations and fake news, and that Cairo is far from being ready for any kind of military conflict. However, there is a genuine crisis that stems from Egyptian President El-Sisi's refusal to accept President Trump's plan to transfer Palestinian residents of Gaza to Jordan and Egypt. One way he's responding to this is by increasing the military buildup of the Egyptian army. However, the Egyptian military operates in coordination with Israel and the multinational monitoring mechanism in the Sinai Peninsula. Alleged threats against the Dimona nuclear facility, videos of Egyptian military convoys, and coordinated military exercises have become tools of online propaganda but lack solid evidence. And Israel continues to maintain vigilance and precise intelligence, understanding that threats in the Middle East can easily escalate. So, despite the tension, strategic relations between the two countries remain stable, and Israel perceives a greater threat from the Jordanian border, where Iran is trying to destabilize the region in Amman. The IDF remains prepared for any scenario, but understands that at this point, Egypt is not actually preparing for war with Israel. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on every development, and we ask you to pray with us